What's up, hotties, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your girl Leslie, and if you've been wondering how you can make your meals the very best yet in your kitchen, this video is for you. I'm a home cook television chef, and needless to say, I know my food. So stay tuned. I'm gonna teach you a little bit more about your kitchen. Hey hotties, welcome to my kitchen. As they used to say on MTV Cribs, this is where the magic happens. While some people would always do that in their bedrooms, I'm like, yes, of course, magic happens there. But let me tell you, this is where I'm really pulling rabbits out of hats, okay? For those of you that don't know, I'm a home cook television chef. I had a program on Aspire TV called Butter and Brown.
Season finale of Butter and Brown.
We're going to be taking advantage of one of the hottest food trends and hosting a pop-up kitchen.
We've got a fabulous mixologist in Ryan O'Welly, who's gonna make us
That southern heat.
I'm so excited. You did that.
Now that's a beverage.
I did a program for Food Network called Traditional, and I had another show called Big Screen Small Bites that also ran on Aspire. So I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to food. I want to teach people how to make food the very best way that they can, and by doing that, you can use one of my hot minimalism tips, or what I call the keys to the hot life, and I'm going to show you how to build a pantry so that you always have something on hand to get the most delicious meals that you're looking for. I think that there's nothing wrong with learning recipes, but when you learn flavor, it's when you really can learn how to cook your very best. So I want to share with you guys some of the things that I always keep on hand in my pantry so that I'm never like reaching and grabbing, and that these are not things that I purchase every time I go to the grocery store. This really starts to help you when you're at the store too, because then you're not trying to like make and pick up certain sauces just for one dish, but rather you have these things at your house all the time, and the only thing that you should be going to the grocery store for are your proteins, your vegetables, and your fresh things like that. One thing I always keep on hand is fresh herbs. Chives, because they can go on everything from like salads to baked potatoes to, you know, garnishing anything, but it has like a, you know, sort of light onion flavor, and it packs a punch with being like something that's so small. I like to keep fresh thyme. I have a little bit of Thai basil here. That was specific for a curry that I was making, but you can keep regular basil, which is also great for pestos. You can put it in sauces. You can put it in salads. You can eat it with stone fruits, which are in season right now. It's a great herb. And then I've got a little bit of dill. And I store these just in my fridge, like standing up. I like to buy them one off because I may like not use it all the time, but I keep some myriad of herbs in my refrigerator always. Fresh herbs really help bring out the flavor in your food, and the places where people rely on that flavor is really in a lot of dry things, right? We all have garlic powder, onion powder, you know, dried parsley and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're really looking to punch up the flavor in your food, it's the fresh herbs and things like that that will really bring that flavor to it. And you won't find yourself having to like pile on dry seasonings just to punch the flavor up. So often, you know, people are like, oh, your food is under seasoned. And it's not so much that it's under seasoned, but one, you may be using like old dry spices that have just been in your cabinet, in your pantry a really long time. So the flavor is not gonna be as pungent as it was before and as strong as it was before. But you find that you have to use less of fresh herbs as opposed to dry, because, you know, as something is dried down, the flavor tends to like come down a little bit too. I always keep miso. Miso is the perfect source of salt and like an umami flavor. Umami is the marriage of all flavors: sweet, sour, bitter, you know, salty, and all of those things in one. And so miso is perfect for you to like season up fish and protein. It's just a great additive to add into sauces and things like that, like dressings, marinades. It's the perfect thing. In addition to that, there's some sauces that are, you know, things I always keep on hand. Soy sauce. So soy sauce is another great form of salt to have in your pantry. I think some people are only used to seeing like soy sauce on the table at a Japanese, you know, restaurant, sushi restaurant, what have you, or maybe they give it to you at like Panda Express. But soy sauce is such an excellent flavor base, and you can use it for a lot of marinades. You can use it with steaks, you can use it with beef. It's just also another great thing to keep in your pantry all the time because it adds a depth of flavor to things. And so often with home cooks, they're not ever able to get that extra layer of flavor on their food and on their meals because they don't know how to like layer and combine flavors the way that chefs are taught to do in culinary school. Another thing that I always keep on hand is sesame oil. Now, sesame oil is something that it has a very strong flavor, so a little goes a long way. This is a huge bottle, but I make a lot of food that is like in the sort of, you know, Asian lexicon. So Japanese, you know, Korean, Chinese, and things like that. So I keep this on hand, so it's not something that I'm always having to buy every time I go to the store. Another one of those items, QP mayo. This is the best mayonnaise. So if you eat sushi, this is what you're eating when you're eating spicy mayo. It's usually QP and sriracha mixed together with a little bit of soy sauce and sometimes like a dollop of sesame oil. And so this is a little tangier flavor than the typical mayo. It just has a little bit more richness to it than some of the other like Best Foods or Duke's or Hellmann's or whatever. All great mayonnaises. I am a mayo fan. I think it's funny when black folks are like, who eats mayonnaise? And I'm like, who eats a dry sandwich? Like, who eats a dry burger? That's weird. Aioli is mayonnaise just jazzed up. So it's something else that, you know, I think you should keep in your pantry. Tomato paste. Tomato paste is excellent for, you know, when you're making your sauces. Like if you're doing a spaghetti sauce, most people might just get a can of tomatoes, pour it in, put in some, you know, dried herbs, oregano, Italian seasoning, etc., and the sauce will be fine, right? But you don't want it to just be fine. You want it to be elevated. You want it to be delicious. Tomato paste is how that works. So you add your tomato paste with your meat, you let it caramelize, you know, it brings out another layer of flavor onto your food. And this is something that you want to always keep on hand. Again, in the grocery store, in the pasta aisle is where you'll find tomato paste. You need some sort of vinegar. Vinegar. Vinegar is great obviously for an acid, but it's excellent when you want to make vinaigrettes. I keep white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar, balsamic, all of those different things because it adds that level of acid that you may need for something that citrus cannot always do. Sometimes a lemon just is not going to cut it. You're going to need a little bit of vinegar. And so those are some of the things that I always keep on hand. In addition to like canned fish. So I keep, you know, salmon, I keep anchovies, which is also an excellent source of salt. It's something that I use to like add into my pantry all the time. And one of the things that I think people forget about is like stocking your pantry with canned goods, canned fishes, sauces, and different sorts of things. So you always have a flavor profile to pull from rather than just using like a recipe and then only buying the things that the recipe needs and then maybe not using them again. So along with keeping a stocked pantry, I also have a few books that I want to recommend to you that can really teach you about how to have flavor in your food, how to add flavors in your food, and what to combine. Now, I'm not a traditionally classically trained chef. I did not go to culinary school, but interestingly enough, I have worked with a lot of professional chefs in kitchens, on TV, and it's funny because what they'll tell me is you don't really have to go to culinary school. You learned and you know everything that they would teach you in culinary school. Essentially, they would just be teaching me like knife skills and different type of cuts. But I taught myself how to cook by watching TV and by reading. I read so many cookbooks to the point now that I collect them and I love them. So people will send them to me, but I have a few that I recommend that I think really can help people learn how to cook who feel like they don't know how. One of those first books is Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat by Samin Nosrat. This book will teach you essentially what is salt, what is categorized as salt, what's categorized as fat, acids, and heat in your food. When you combine those four flavors in any meal, you will probably have one of the most excellent meals of your life. And it's because they hit every point on your tongue and they balance out everything. So sometimes people will taste something and they go, I'm not sure what's missing. And it's probably one of these. It's either some salt, it's either fat, it's acid, or it's heat. But the best thing about this book is that she teaches you sources of flavor. For example, this page is sources of umami. And what do we see? What do we see, hotties? Soy sauce. What did I tell you? fish, anchovies. What did I tell you? This is Parmesan. She's got some tomatoes, mushrooms. So this is fish sauce, also a thing that's always in my fridge. And the way that you're able to learn about these elements of good cooking, as she calls it, this book can teach it. Best book. And if you want to even know more, watch the Netflix series. It was one of my favorites. Another book that I bought when I first moved out on my own to really learn how to cook was the How to Cook Everything cookbook. And as you can see, it has all sorts of tabs in it, because when I say that I study things, I mean it. This book, look how thick this is. It has so many recipes, but it teaches you everything from how to make pie dough, how to make pizza dough. You can learn how to make pasta in this book. You'll learn how to make every dressing, every sauce. And once you really learn how to do something one time and the basics of something, you can add different flavors to anything. And that's why it's so important to not just limit yourself to recipes. Recipes are wonderful. I think they're a great way to start cooking. But if you want to become the person who gets put in charge of cooking, you want to become the person that people are like, oh, we need so-and-so to make it. If you don't want anybody to say who made the macaroni and cheese and it was you, listen to Leslie. Listen to me. Listen to me. You want to get this book. One of my other favorite books, and I actually saw this book in my grandmother's kitchen, in my mother's kitchen, and I knew that I needed to have one. It is The Joy of Cooking. Now, you've probably seen this book in another form. It usually has a white cover. I wanted to get the cute version. So I bought The Joy of Cooking, and I actually got this from CB2 because it was all black and I wanted it to match my kitchen. And I just wanted it to be a book that was leather bound and would last me forever. As you can see, I even used black tabs for this book. But The Joy of Cooking is very similar to kind of how to learn how to cook everything, in that it will teach you all things, even how to do spice blends. So in here, it will teach you how to do curry powder, Chesapeake Bay seasoning, which is what Old Bay. So chili powder, just garam masala for Indian food. Just so many different things that you can learn that you will be surprised everything, goes into something. And so this is one of my favorite books, because if there's anything I want to know, if I'm like, oh, I wonder how to make, I don't know, naan, or I wonder if I want to make a coffee cakes, very specific, I can do that with this book. And this is one of the best books I've ever seen. And it's funny because my mom actually got this book when she got married. And so many women used to get this book when they got married, because it was of course, you're supposed to try to cook and keep a man child. You need to cook for yourself, okay? Cook because you want to eat, right? So that is something that I think you should have in your kitchen if you want cookbooks and you want to read from them. These 3 cookbooks will do that. All seasoning is not created equal, and I think sometimes people don't really understand that. So most people in their house are going to have table salt, probably in a blue box or blue container. It's just Morton's, table iodine salt, and that's fine. It is so much more saltier than you really are thinking that it is. And so it's just not a salt that chefs will use in a kitchen to put on anything. They don't use table salt for anything. Normally, most chefs are going to use a kosher salt. This is Diamond, which is the best kosher salt. This is usually what's found in most kitchens. And if you use this, let's say you have a recipe and it asks for a teaspoon of salt. If you were to use this as opposed to Morton's, you would use the full teaspoon. If you were to use table salt, you would want to half in that, because then your food would be overly salty. But this is what you use to season things at every turn. Anytime you're adding a new ingredient, this is the salt that they're going to use. This is Maldon sea salt, which is a finishing salt. And I keep them in salt wells. So I have my kosher salt in this one. I have my sea salt in this one. And essentially, as I'm seasoning, I'm just taking pinches, putting it in the pot, stirring it up. And when I'm done and finished with my meal, I will, finish my dishes with this kind of salt. And it's a different flavor profile, because what happens at the end of a meal, sometimes once you've seasoned everything and it's permeated into the meat or into the protein or into the vegetable, you might need something on the end just to give it to elevate the flavor back. That's what a finishing salt will do. Obviously, a pepper grinder, pepper mill is great because when you freshly grind your peppercorns, you're opening them up instantly, as opposed to getting already ground pepper, which is peppercorns that have been opened and ground already, and so they're kind of like losing and the flavor is diminishing as they set. And so this is something, you know, these are like seasonings that you should always have. Trust me when I say I'm a person that also still uses garlic powder, onion powder, and all of the things. But when you add freshness to your meals, you elevate them and bring out so much more in them. So if you can find Maldon's, you can find this like on Amazon, but it's usually, you know, in your salt out, in the seasoning, and you can get a little box. It's perfect. You will not be sad, trust me. Let's take a look in my pantry so I can show you a few more things that I didn't have the chance to show you here. Welcome to my little pantry. It is not huge. It's really like an under stairwell sort of pantry, but I just wanted to show you things that I have going on. So I like to keep all of my dried like sort of goods and things that don't need to be refrigerated on the inside of the door in like a dark place. I just added these hooks, and this is where I keep like sweet potatoes or any other potatoes that I would need, in addition to like my onions or garlic or things like that. You really want to keep those in dry, like sort of, you know, cool places so that they don't go bad. These are my grocery bags. And then as you can see, I try to keep things organized in this sort of way. My children have stuff back here. So I take things out of boxes because I find that when you keep them in the boxes, stuff tends to go stale. So airtight containers are better for like cereals and things. That way you're not worrying about closing the box up, especially if you have kids. It just makes it easier. These containers are, you know, here's some more miso that I have. Like I said, I have canned fish, so this is some anchovies. Here's like canned clams. Some people would think that chefs don't use those, but really, when I didn't have any money, okay, and the tax bracket was 0, this is still how I was making great meals, because you don't want to disregard canned items. They actually can come in the clutch and help you still make great meals too. Down here I have my things like baking soda, you know, cornmeal, stuff like that. I keep a lot of nuts, a variety, so like cashews, pistachios, walnuts, anything like that. Lazy Susans are the best. So I have these in my pantry where you see I have a Worcestershire sauce, balsamic, little glaze. I'm from LA. You know I gotta have a tortilla, always, okay? And then behind me is usually where I have pantry items like my brown sugar, oats, different types of rices that I keep. Everything in here in my pantry are things that I keep on hand all the time, so that if I ever want to make anything, I'm not having to buy that when I go to the grocery store. So usually if I think of a meal or I think of a dish that I want, I am always prepared with what I need on hand. Welcome to the garage. This is my little pantry corner over here, from like extra things I need in the house to food. So usually up here is where I keep like extra pasta, you know, like bucatini, extra seasoning, you know, peppercorn, any other seasonings that I may need. I just want you to know that if you want to elevate your food, you can. You can make some of the best meals of your life simply by learning and understanding flavor, by keeping a stocked pantry so that you're not having to buy something each and every time you want to make a recipe, and also checking out those 3 cookbooks. When you learn about cooking and you start to understand how to build flavors, making umami, using salt and acid and fat and heat, you can start eating at home just as well as you do when you go outside. I hope that this episode of The Keys to the Hot Life and Hot Minimalism helps you start to have some great meals and makes you become the cook that you really want to become. If you have any questions, you can drop them below. I will do my best to answer. And until I see you guys next week, bye.